After I reacted to episode 8 of the Amazing Digital Circus yesterday, I got a comment from Aesthetic Desk here on YouTube asking if I was going to make a video about the Amazing Digital Guardians, which is an Amazing Digital Circus AU. And since I needed a palate cleanser after the craziness of episode 8, I decided to check it out, and it's actually really good. And I also really like that it has some connections to other AUs as well, which is a nice twist. Now, most of you probably know by now that the Amazing Digital Circus revolves around a bunch of characters that seem to be stuck in this virtual world, and they're basically being tormented by this AI called Caine. And as we've seen in the latest episode, he literally thinks that he's a god.
I'm better! I'm more powerful! I'm the original! I am God!
These characters are desperately trying to find a way to get out of this digital world before they break mentally and end up extracting and being sent to the void. Now, what I like about this AU is that it takes a slightly different look at their situation. In the first chapter here, we see this little comment by an anonymous user comparing the Amazing Digital Circus to an old school cartoon called Code Lyoko. And for those of you that may be too young to remember this cartoon, it's basically these 4 kids who find a supercomputer that allow them to enter the digital world and fight against this corrupt AI. So I don't think I need to explain too much how this comparison definitely makes sense for the Amazing Digital Circus, but especially for this AU, as you will see in a moment. We also see that Caine is explaining the different realms of reality, which I actually found really interesting. He started with the surface reality, which of course is the human world. Then we have the cosmos, which is basically the digital world where all these characters reside right now. And then finally, we have like this middle layer called the digital realities, which is basically a bunch of different digital universes. And while Caine is explaining all this, we see a split appear in the ceiling and Pomni fall through, kind of reflecting the first episode of the Amazing Digital Circus. But what's different in this AU is that when Pomni lands, she's immediately attacked by a bunch of abstractions, showing me that in this universe, Caine is not actually able to keep these corrupted characters locked away. But luckily, before they can get to Pomni, we see Rag jump into combat with this massive shield, and she pretty effortlessly repels the threat, while also assuring Pomni that she'll be able to keep her safe. And to my surprise, we also get to see that Kaufmo is still alive in this AU, and he seems to be like a powerhouse in his own right. And I also like that he has this little cheesy one-liner like a Leon Kennedy. And just to add some overkill, we see 4 bombs come into the frame and completely obliterate these abstractions. And I love how Pomni is just in wide-eyed shock being thrust into all this chaos. After all that, we see Kinger and the rest of the crew come into frame. And just in case you can't tell, this massive character in the back here is Gangle. She went from timid and weak to absolutely jacked.
Who decided that?
Now, this panel is really interesting to me because we can see more abstracted characters coming up from the void, confirming that Caine must have lost some control over them. But seeing this, Kinger doesn't even flinch. He just tells Ragatha and Kaufmo to get Pomni to safety, confident that he and the rest of the team can handle whatever is coming for them. And if I'm being honest, Kinger does look pretty tough right here. Now, before we move on to the next chapter, let's go ahead and look at some of the info cards that Revolver created for each of the characters. First, we see Pomni, who is called the Jet Jester. And just like in the original series, she just wants to go back home, and she also has that same nervous kind of twitchy energy. What I find interesting here, though, is that the card states that if they can stabilize Pomni, she has the potential to be the most powerful guardian in this AU. Next, we see Caine, and we can kind of tell that he's the one writing these info cards. I say this because of the way that he's actually talking about himself, literally saying that he's the best host ever. And also, as you look here at the bottom, it has this C log off, and it kind of gives it away. In this AU, he seems to be acting more as like a sidekick or a support character to Kinger and the rest of the crew. And I say Kinger and the crew because he seems to be the leader in this AU. For whatever reason, his mind seems to be fairly intact in this timeline, even though he's not like immersed in darkness, and he seems to be a force to be reckoned with. We know, just like in the original timeline, he is the character that has survived in this world the longest, outside of Caine, obviously. And with that, he's the only character that can kind of keep Caine in line because he's the only one that actually understands the way that program works. And I think this is why we see here, Caine says he better be careful around him. Zoobles is pretty much her normal self, but in this universe, she likes to find like different types of weapons to attach to herself instead of just regular body parts. She kind of reminds me of Baby 5 from One Piece, the woman that had like that devil fruit that allowed her to turn any body part into a weapon. After that, we get Jax, and I like this design for him. It gives off kind of like Amy Rose vibes, but way more reckless. In this AU, Jax is treating this whole thing like a video game. And while he technically is a part of the team, he definitely is the most hard-headed member, and he's the hardest to work with. And I find it interesting that Caine makes a note to keep an eye on him, simply because he's such a wild card. After that, we have Gangle, and we learn that the reason she was able to turn into this absolute unit was because she found a mask called the War Face Mask. And this mask has given her the ability to basically fill any role that the team needs, making her a jack of all trades in a sense. Ragatha, on the other hand, is more of a defensive fighter, covering herself in protective padding and even carrying around a shield which has the ability to harden or soften whenever she wills it to. On the team, she kind of acts as like the voice of reason, trying to keep everybody positive and motivated. After that, we have Kaufmo's, and just like with Kinger, he has been here for a really long time, which is part of the reason that I think he's so capable in this AU. And just like with Ragatha, he seems to want to actually keep people's morale up by making jokes and hopefully getting people to laugh. And the last info card is Bubble, and they're basically meant to kind of like be an assisting character like Caine, but Bubbles is a bit more chaotic, so their help may manifest in odd ways.
Whoa! Clean up on aisle U!
I'm on it, boss!
Why are you like this?
Next in the chapter, we see that Ragatha and Kaufmo are able to get Pomni to this area that they call the Guardians Guild, which acts as basically a safe room. And of course, while they're here, Pomni is asking questions, trying to figure out who these people are and what's actually happening in this weird digital world. But Ragatha just lets her know that they'll get her back home soon and that she won't have to worry about any of this. And she seems to be like sincere with what she's saying here. But this doesn't really put Pomni at ease, and right as she's gonna like start freaking out, we see Kinger and the rest of the crew arrive, and Caine starts to explain that he'll be able to get her back home since he acts as like the host / admin here. And it kind of breaks my heart seeing Pomni light up at this news, because I think we all know that there's a good chance that she won't be going home. But also because we see her start to actually panic once she realizes that she can't remember her own name. And Caine is trying to explain to her that no one really remembers much from their previous life when they get stuck here. But we can clearly see that this information doesn't help ease Pomni's distress, causing Kinger to tell Caine to just send her home already. And for a moment, I was ready to eat my words, because it seems like Pomni was actually going to make it back home. We even get to see this cute moment where Ragatha and Kaufmo are saying goodbye, looking genuinely happy that someone will actually get to escape this place. But before the transfer can go through, there's a loud beep followed by an error message. And we see Pomni start to glow red, and the transfer is canceled. But if we're all being honest, I think we knew that this wasn't going to be that easy. Now, funny enough, Caine seems to be legitimately confused about this, but that doesn't stop Kinger from punching him. And before episode 8, I may have felt a little bad for Caine, but after seeing some of the stuff that he put these guys through, I think a few punches may be warranted.
I'm so proud of you guys.
I also find it interesting that in this AU, none of the characters seem to be afraid of Caine, and we can see this by the fact that Kinger tells him that they're not friends and demands that he explains why he's unable to send Pomni home. And the only reason Kinger doesn't deal more damage to Caine is because Kaufmo gets in between the two. And while Caine is thanking them, Rag makes it quite clear that they don't actually want thanks, they just want an explanation. And after some questioning, we learn that when Pomni was falling, she actually fell through many different universes. As we see here, she talks about a casino, a fight club, an office, and some type of fantasy world. And she says that she is remembering a bunch of these realities at the same time, almost as if she has memories from different lives that she's lived. And this is because she actually does. She didn't simply just fall through these different realities, but she actually landed in them for a while. Because as we see here, she actually spent time in the Fight Club universe created by Burrotello. And here we see that she's described as a new fighter that just arrived in this fight club created by this AI, of course, Caine. And her goal is to make a ton of money and become the champ here. The next reality that she was in is the Caine-enabled casino AU created by CNA-enterprise, which is another AU where Pomni ends up working at this casino because she moved from her country to avoid being drafted into war. What she didn't realize was that the casino was involved in a bunch of criminal activity, and she basically ends up becoming the right-hand man of Caine, who seems to be like the leader of this mafia, basically. And just as a side note, this AU actually has like a 3-minute animation that is really well done, and it goes into detail about what's happening in this AU and like the mission that Pomni and Jax goes into. I'll make sure to link that down below if you want to go check it out. I think it was really well done. And then after that, we have the Office AU created by Pikavani. And in this AU, we see that Pomni is a office manager, with the rest of the cast basically being her co-workers. And at a glance, this one seems very much like a slice of life AU. And I have to say that I really like the artwork in this one. It gives like anime vibes in a way. And while each of these AUs can probably have a full video on their own, I simply wanted to point them out so that you can understand what Caine is referring to in this AU. Specifically when he says that Pomni has fallen through too many realities and now her anchor is ruined. He's basically saying that this digital world no longer recognizes that she is from the human world, but rather thinks that she is a creature of the digital world because she's been a part of too many realities. And to put that simply, it just means that she can no longer go back to the human world, or I guess more accurately, there's no easy way to get her back to the human world. And while Jax makes a rude comment here, basically calling her another sucker who's stuck here, which isn't wrong, he still gets a good and well-deserved punch from Zoobles. But at the end of the day, Pomni still has to come to terms with the reality that she may be stuck in this world forever, unless they can come up with a new plan to get out. The one saving grace though is that she's not alone, and the whole crew comes together to kind of welcome her and even give her a new name. But before Caine can pull out that naming machine, Pomni actually remembers what her name has been in these other realities, and she tells them to call her Pomni. And this AU ends with them welcoming her to the family. As of right now, I don't know if this AU will continue, but I thought that this one was really well done. The lack of color really worked for me, and the overall artwork in itself was superb. I also really enjoyed that Revolver tied other AUs to kind of give us an explanation as to why Pomni is stuck here, and also they were able to introduce me to a few other AUs that I think I'm going to check out in the future. All in all, I really enjoyed this one, and I look forward to viewing more of the creators' work if they have any. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this video on the screen here. Make sure to go check out Revolver over on Tumblr and give them some love and support, and we'll see you tomorrow with another video. Peace, peace.